Hello and welcome to the new deep dive episode. My name is Sanja Čopić, and today we're going to tackle the topic of innovation. Marketers are under constant pressure to develop new products that stand out, offer unique value propositions, and capture consumer interest. However, with innovation come inherent risks. The process of developing and launching new products involves significant investments of time, resources, and capital. While continuous innovation is essential for growth and survival, it's also important to mitigate the risks associated with product development. This includes conducting thorough market research, understanding consumer preferences, testing prototypes, and refining strategies based on feedback. In other words, innovation requires creativity, agility, and adaptability. And I believe it is safe to assume that the research and testing that supports innovation must also be creative, agile, and adaptable. It is precisely why today I'm talking to Cliff Kane, our Senior Director of New Business Development at IC. He had the pleasure of sharing the stage with Shilpa Khanna, Associate Director of Transformational Growth at the Clorox Company, at the recent Quirks Chicago conference. There, they talked about decoding innovation and the challenges that follow it. Hello, Cliff, and thank you for being here.
Thanks so much, Sanja. Happy to be here.
Now, before we get into the key takeaways from your fantastic session on innovation and packaging testing at Quirks Chicago, let us take a moment to reflect on the carefree and enjoyable aspects of the process. I would like to ask you to think about the most recent product innovation that has piqued your interest or gotten you excited. For example, it seems that Kraft Heinz is on a roll with new product launches, or perhaps this is my impression because I am vegan. Regardless, they first announced their dairy-free mac and cheese, followed by the Barbie barbecue sauce, which is not only vegan but also pink. I must admit that at first I thought it was fake news, but then I realized it was a limited edition created in collaboration with Mattel, as the Barbie brand is celebrating its 65th anniversary. How about you, Cliff? What crosses your mind?
So while I haven't tried one yet, I'm really fascinated by Mr. Beast and his Feastables chocolate bars and candy. For those who don't know him, massive YouTube celebrity who has now gotten into the CPG space. I think we've all seen plenty of influencer and celebrity endorsed products in things like beauty and cosmetics. We've seen them in alcohol. We see a lot of celebrities kind of tagging on to tequila brands. I don't think you see nearly as many center aisle CPG brands being launched out there. So while this product isn't brand new, it's been around for a year or two. There's been a reformulation and some new packaging this year. So I'm just really curious to see if it keeps on growing in some of the more traditional food, drug, and mass channels, or if it starts to fall off at some point, a la what we've seen with Prime, that hydration beverage. So I guess we'll see.
Wow, thanks, Cliff. That's a really interesting observation. Thanks for sharing. Okay, so now let's hear the first lesson on developing new products from a seasoned professional, Shilpa Khanna, Associate Director of Transformational Growth at the Clorox Company.
So let me give you or tell you a story. About 10 years ago, I did a typical need analysis to figure out what innovation should we do. We found this awesome place where consumers were not satisfied with a specific dirt removal. No solution was able to solve that for them. Super excited, huge opportunity. Everybody has this issue, large market size. We got excited. We went out there. We went all the way to Europe to source the right material, right solution. Found it. Came back here, right? A really awesome scientist of mine, she developed a gun, sort of that looks like a Ghostbusters gun, where she could put the soil on the surface evenly as if it was a consumer's home and as if it had collected for days. We did the testing, consumers were super satisfied. I was so excited. This was going to be like the next best thing after Wonder Bread, right? Launched it. Year and a half later, we had to retract. We failed. And the sad part was, it was not the product that failed, because I have tons of it hoarded under every sink. It's amazing. So it's my career's objective to bring that back. The issue was the product was good. We got excited and we went to launch fast. And we spent 1/4 of the time on packaging that we had on product, right? So and most people approach packaging exactly like the image up. Once you spend hours decorating the cake, you feel like packaging is the cherry on top. And really, that's not the truth. My recommendation is look at packaging as that door that creates sexy curb appeal for you, right? No matter how awesomely the house is decorated inside, the material that's used is amazing. If people are not excited to walk into the door, you're not able to get their interest, it really doesn't matter what the product is at all, right? So my recommendation is actually to try to think about packaging development as soon as you're done with, validating your concept. So right when you're starting your product development, parallel path packaging development as well. Both of those things going hand in hand makes a huge difference to the holistic success of the proposition.
This was a very honest and clear takeaway. And aside from failing to conduct packaging testing on time, what are some of the other mistakes you believe marketers make without even realizing it?
I would say it's not just the time component, although that plays a big role, but really more broadly, it's coming up with a fantastic new innovation idea because innovation in CPG is quite important. Yet, they oftentimes they neglect the design component of the product, right? You think about the design, the package design, that's really how consumers will first encounter it, right? Yes, there is some advertising, but in reality, it's because they see it on shelves. So there's the, ignoring the design piece, but it's also not gauging how shoppers actually react to it in a competitive context. Things are much harder on the shelf, right? Things do great in isolation. You put it on a shelf with 100 other SKUs, and that's where new products go to die.
We had this product that we're coming new into this category. We're excited about it, and the goal and the rally cry is we gotta beat competition. We gotta beat the big leader. And we do packaging qual after packaging qual. And the design is changing. We eventually, consumers are like, this is sort of not nice, this is sort of not nice. I like this element of the competition. We start taking consumers' feedback, evolving the design. 3 months later, we look like the ugly twin of the competitor, right? We're almost the same elements, and we're like, okay, that did not work, right? And this has happened to me in multiple projects. So, taking the different approach is actually using quantitative testing early in the packaging to really go broad and wide, to look at designs that would break through, that are unique, that capture the essence of what you're trying to deliver, but in a unique way. You will spin much less if you go through the quant lens and then, build with qual where required. So while in most other product testing and so on, we start with qual and then go quant to validate, I would actually recommend screen with quant and, screen, like also validate with quant and then only use qual to build. It will reduce the spin and make you feel more confident about the direction you're going in.
Here, Shilpa provided another excellent experience-based example. What is the primary difference between qualitative and quantitative insights that makes quant the more useful approach to begin with?
I will caveat all this by saying I am a former moderator. I love qual. I think qual is a great part to play with consumer insights overall. I've talked to thousands of consumers live at the shelf. However, I think we see when it comes to innovation development and testing, consumers in a qualitative sense can be really anchored by what's currently in the market, something that Shilpa cited with their new product looking a lot like the key competitor after a few rounds of qual. And thus, all your feedback may send you down the exact same path, right? And before you know it, you're a me too, and you haven't really developed your own unique proposition. So what I like about injecting quant earlier in the process, in not only quant, but also behavioral metrics, right? How people actually shop and see and behave. You give yourself a more data-driven path forward and a bit more objectivity with your ideas and versus the key competitors you're trying to go after.
What do you focus on when you think about innovation? Do you focus on the fact about being really clear about who you are as a standalone product, so when somebody looks at you, they understand what you are? Or do you try to stack up to be the tallest in the lineup of your competition? So this is a trick question because the answer to this is both. You really, really have to be able to achieve both. If you think about it, we designed to be able to stand out versus competition was really important because shelves today are extremely cluttered and confusing, and the options are numerous, especially with personalization. Every time I walk into Target and walk through the personal care aisles, I'm terrified. There's like 4 aisles, right? And I'm not sure like which, there's no Indian demographic section yet. So I'm like not sure where I fall. And so it's really confusing for consumers. The thing is, though, mostly there are chances for us to not only stand out versus competition, you end up doing merch, you end up being on an end cap with other products from your lineup. And if the consumer doesn't have the context of the category to support you, do they understand what you are? And sometimes we lose that, right? We work so hard to look great against our competition, we forget to think when somebody takes this home or somebody sees it on an end cap, can they tell what it is independently? Right? So I would ask you to please focus on both elements of packaging when you are looking at packaging development or direction or strategy.
This appears to be a difficult one to master. I mean, constant perspective shifts are certainly not easy. So, Cliff, how can the research setup and framework help clients be mindful of the product's identity in isolation and on the shelf?
Going to the shelf and research adds a lot of rigor, undoubtedly. But of course, there is complexity, there is cost, there's added timing. So while we definitely want to end with shelf-based testing, it will give us the best possible chance at product launch and succeeding in the market. I think oftentimes earlier in the process, it's maybe a bit too soon for shelf testing. But there's still a lot you can learn even with just some new designs in isolation before we get to the shelf. You can do that in a behavioral system one testing manner.
So one of the things that's happened to me most commonly in the past, with a lot of it in packaging, but also in other idea or concept testing, is you get flat results, and you're like, great, all of them are doing good. What do I do with that, right? And you don't have a clear idea, and you are making guesses at that point. I love this methodology for the fact that not only do I have clear winners, I have exactly the reason why they won. Design is a very subjective thing, and you will not believe when we sit in rooms with the design agency, with me as the consumer insights lead and the brand person, every single person has a different perspective on what's going to win, what they like, what they don't like. So this is a great way to prove out your hypotheses and really be clear on what's driving it. All these elements that we tested, emotion, what does this stand for, ratings like safety or efficacy, especially for Clorox, is super important because it drives back to the strategy. What do we want this new packaging to stand for? Are consumers being able to get that? Is that in line with or different than the category? All these elements are also much more important than just understanding which is the first, second, third. The piece that I will say for me in terms of IC is that and this is my trade secret, but I don't work with vendors. I work with strategic partners. So what was really amazing for me was somebody who came back and said, scenario one, scenario two, scenario three, this is what we would do. And that's what I love when I work with people, is that you have a clear reco and a point of view that helps me make my decision, right? So I really, really appreciate that of his team.
Well, this finally makes it very clear why it is critical for clients to obtain distinct results when testing multiple options in order to be able to receive clear recommendations. Can you walk us through the testing stages and the steps that the team used to determine clear winners among the previously mentioned packaging options?
The first step was to take the 7 designs that Clorox brought to us to really help them siphon down to a more workable number to then ultimately validate. I would say 7 is way too many for a full shelf test earlier in the process. So that would come later on when we were down to, say, 2 or 3. So our approach to the screening phase was to first start with MaxDiff, a great statistical tool. We took in these 7 Clorox designs. We put in 5 of their key competitors. And among those 12 in total that consumers saw, it gives a great sense of the relative interest between the Clorox designs themselves, but also compared to those key competitors. After that point, we did more monadic learning, where one consumer sees one design. We split them into 7 paths. And from there, we did what we call click tracking, which is likes and dislikes on the pack. It's a heat map. It's some quantified liking of elements. It's a bunch of open ends. And then we concluded with a fuller survey that had a heavier claim testing component. So coming out of that first phase, we identified 2 lead designs that were ready to move in a fuller shelf test, the strongest performing ones overall. We also had a structural variation in terms of the actual packaging structure itself from one of the designs. That added a third testing option. And as a bonus, we actually put in their work in process design that had been there all throughout the start of the innovation process as the fourth cell benchmark, if you will. I would say key to note too for the shelf test is that for each design, we now had a full 4 SKU lineup, different scents for the product, which would make the shelf testing metrics much more realistic of what would actually happen at the launch in the market. I will say the at-shelf metrics, such as the full basket of purchases analysis, visibility of the new products via our proprietary eye tracking, some findability exercises for navigation learning are really the most key, ultimately. What did people actually do at the shelf? We pair those after those exercises with deeper brand and pack and product communication metrics away from the shelf with the designs in isolation. Ultimately, we identified a lead path forward for Clorox, one of which, by the way, was superior to that work in process benchmark design we looked at, and recommended some smart tactical color and messaging optimizations going into their launch.
Thank you, Cliff, for providing us with even more in-depth insights into the entire testing process, as well as your unique perspective, which is obvious given your over 15 years of experience in shopper behavior research. So let us summarize a bit. After this testing journey, and considering all your previous experiences, what is the best way to approach package testing during the new product development process?
I would say, first and foremost, make sure the design process and, of course, testing with those has a strong seat at the table from the very beginning. You know, it's really easy just to take a default or work in process design all throughout your testing and only do a fuller exploratory at the very end. But you really miss a good chance along the way to further craft the idea visually via exploring a number of different design routes and different claims and messages. And of course, we know that time is often during launch, during these very long innovation processes. Sometimes you hear at the very end, oh, we're out of time. We just had launch. We don't have any time for testing, which I think is a mistake, of course. I've been focused on CPG behavioral research for close to 20 years now, and the innovation failure rates have always been 75% or higher. You see this stat constantly cited. We know new products fail within a couple of years typically. I'm very confident in saying that bringing in behavioral testing earlier in the process and also adding shopper context out of the shelf can really only improve those rates over time.
And with that, another deep dive episode comes to a close. Cliff, thank you for sharing your knowledge and experience with us. If you enjoyed this conversation and haven't already, please follow us on YouTube and subscribe to the IC Deep Dive on Spotify. In the meantime, join the conversation, share your thoughts, send us questions, or suggest topics for future episodes. We hope we have encouraged and inspired you. Until the next episode, be brave and creative when innovating, but remember to test your ideas and concepts along the way. Until the next episode, be brave and creative when innovating, but remember to test your ideas and concepts along the way.